Assalamualaikum to all of you. Peace be upon you all. Welcome to the webinar, The Unholy War of Peace Through Strength, no? Quote and unquote. We have gathered here today the peoples of faith, the global ecumenical movement and interfaith movement, because our unity is being tested again by US and Israel's war of aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran. For more than a month, we have witnessed the US and its war criminal ally in the Middle East or West Asia, Israel, the bombing of Iran and Lebanon, while continuing violence and repression against the Palestinian people. Islamophobia is being promoted again to justify the war of aggression. But this pattern is not new. 25 years ago, the United States launched its so-called war on terror. Trump's claim that the whole civilization will die tonight is a reckless statement full of disrespect to culture and religion, as well as fuels anger and fear. That image of Trump portraying himself as Jesus the Savior is truly disturbing. Why should we believe a person who tried to cover up involvement with pedophiles and then portrayed himself as the savior of the world from the axis of evil? These attempts to deepen religious divide must be exposed and opposed. To give us the context of the webinar and introduce himself, and Peace for Life is one of the organizer of this webinar, we have Pastor Alan Sarter. Pastor?
Thank you, Amira. And again, welcome again to this evening's webinar. This event has been, as already mentioned, by the International League of People's Struggle, the People's Forum on Peace for Life, the Ecumenical Bishops Forum, and the Moro-Christian People's Alliance. We are holding this timely event following how the United States and Israel are justifying their unlawful war against Iran and even against Venezuela in particular by using, among others, religion and faith as tool to carry out their agenda of global domination, and I would say plunder of world's resources. I just want to say, and as a way also of introducing Peace for Life, which is an international interfaith movement for justice and peace, which was established at a time when the United States launched its so-called war on terror. So Peace for Life came out at such a historical juncture. It was about 24 years ago as an ecumenical alliance and global network of peoples of faith for peace and justice. What was significant in the formation of Peace for Life as a faith-based movement was the identification of the United States military dominance as comprising today's empire. And by empire, we mean the combined economic, military, political, and cultural domination by a powerful state, assisted by satellite states and local elites of dominated countries to advance its own interests on a global scale. Among different religions and denominations in the world today, the recognition of the hegemonic role of empire in the political, economic, and cultural sphere of life, even I think in the formulation of their religious beliefs and doctrines, has not been clearly recognized and elucidated. But when Peace for Life was established, this was very clear. Empire is at the very root of why there is so much sufferings in the world today. Why our farmers remain landless and do not receive necessary support to survive and improve their harvest. Why the laborers are denied of just wages and many are forced to go abroad for more decent jobs. Why our indigenous peoples are forcefully evicted from their ancestral lands so their lands are mined by foreign corporations. Why there is so much inequality and injustice. Why nature is crying for overutilization and the resources are plundered without abatement. Why wars persist. We know we are not the first to recognize this, but we have named it. Empire is the enemy. Empire is the primary reason why so many peoples in the world today do not experience life in all its fullness. What we are witnessing today is the never ending, horrifying violence unleashed by the US empire, resulting in broad global economic and financial crisis, impacting the great majority of the people immensely and hurting those who continue to struggle with grinding poverty. The shocks of war are most severely felt by people of the global south who are already left vulnerable due to the neoliberal policies imposed on them by the empire. Alongside these wars of aggression, we are seeing preparations for all-out war, coupled with expansion of military assets of imperialist countries in Asia, Latin America, Africa, and even in Europe. The increasing number of U.S. military bases globally, storage of large weapons, permanent sailing of the empire's naval forces in the seas, and war exercises are also part of the empire's preparations for war. Right now, the U.S., along with Japan and other countries, is holding Balikatan war exercises in the Philippines to turn the Philippines into a forward military base serving as a launching pad for U.S. war of aggression in Asia Pacific, especially against China. And just last week, Secretary of State for Economic Affairs Jacob Helbert announced the United States and the Philippines plans to establish a 4,000-acre industrial hub to secure inputs vital to American and global supply chains. The site is located in the Luzon Economic Corridor of the Philippines and is being designated by the Philippines as an economic security zone, a new model for AI native investment acceleration hubs being developed under the PAC Silica initiative, which now effectively makes the Philippines a member of and now an important cog in the entire U.S. war machine. So not just a staging ground for U.S. troops and sites, the Philippines is now billed as an important part of the U.S. tech supply chain that is crucial for U.S. missiles, drones, and planes. With this escalation of warmongering, what we at Peace for Life is most worried is how religion and faith are being used by empire as its constant companion to justify its unending wars. The resurgence of Islamophobia as an exploitation of theology to recast wars of aggression as holy war has once again been used as a tool by the empire to further divide peoples of faith and carry out its agenda. It has also been reported that the U.S. military commanders have been telling troops their operation was part of God's divine plan, with some invoking Armageddon and the return of Jesus Christ as recruiting tools. The empire's attempt at exacerbating religious divides to further its agenda needs to be exposed. As peoples of faith, empire's misuse of faith must be rejected. This is a sin against God and against our sisters and brothers. Like past empires, today's empire has religious voices who claim war is God's will, who demonize Muslims and other groups that oppose empire, who criminalize peacemakers, and who celebrate Pax Americana as the bringer of so-called true peace, peace with strength. So in this stage of history, we are called to repent from worshiping the false god of empire and war. Our faith must not become a weapon of the oppressor, but must serve in the defense of the oppressed peoples of the world. The necessity of strengthening once more the global ecumenical alliance of peoples of faith and conviction against empire is all the more important in today's world. So with this context and background, again, welcome to our webinar tonight. Thank you.
Yes, sorry
Thank
for
you.
that. Sorry for that. Assalamu alaikum again for those who have come tuned in late, no? You are at this webinar hosted by ILPS, Peace for Life, and the Moro-Christian People's Alliance. I am Amira Lidasan, the Secretary General of the Moro-Christian People's Alliance, and this webinar is entitled The Unholy War of Peace Through Strength. So thank you, Pastor, for exposing the reason behind the wars of aggression, no, the pursuit of geopolitical dominance of the U.S. in the world, no, and segue to our first speaker, no, who will talk about the analysis, no, of the U.S. national security strategy under U.S. President Trump. No, she is the Secretary General of the International League of People's Struggle. She has also worked with Roots for Equity, and her primary areas of work have been focused on anti-globalization, anti-imperialism, especially in the context of rural economy. So for our first speaker, Ms. Asra Zaid. Assalamualaikum, Asra.
Walaikum salam, Amina. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon, everybody from Pakistan. I am very happy to be here, to be talking on a topic, on an issue which has been kind of our daily lives for the past many years now, ever since the genocide that is being carried out in Gaza. So the task that I have been given is to talk about the national security strategy of the United States. It's a document which they came out with in November last year. And then early this year, there was another document which was on the defense strategy of the US. So ILPS has already written a primer explaining the NSS strategy paper as well as the defense strategy paper. And I will be basically talking from the paper in itself, but maybe elaborating a bit. Since November and January of this year, things have escalated, as we know very well. And so the paper is actually a very good marker to how the US, in its fascist tendencies, going to progress in the coming months and years. So let me start. So the NSS is really a true reflection of the highly uncivilized footings of the country that is known as the United States of America. It is a country that has been built on the blood and bones of various mass of people that include, of course, the Native Americans and the African people who were brought by force as slaves to the continent. In the 21st century, the slogan is "Make America Great Again." It is the clarion call of the US at this point. And there are many jokes going around, and I will not waste my time talking about that, but we all know what it means to make America great again. The US does not shy away from reveling in its past atrocities, its wars of aggression, its downing of 2 nuclear bombs, and the blatant colonial conquests. The NSS is a very clear portrayal of US imperialism, though it is now verging on more bluster than any might, to be honest. The NSS, in its very paragraph, has no shame in stating that to ensure that America remains the world's strongest, richest, most powerful, and most successful country for decades to come, our country needs a coherent, focused strategy for how we interact with the world. And so, finishing that quote, I will say, no doubt that the coherent policy is mainly focused on furthering genocidal wars, bombings, death, and destruction. That is what it means to make America great again. To understand the NSS, it is important to understand the change, that the geopolitical change that we see globally. With the turn of the 20th century, we have seen the world changing from the US being the sole global power to a multipolar world, which now includes China and Russia. No doubt that these imperialist powers are contesting each other, vying to mark off the different parts of the globe as their particular colonies. Economically, no doubt, China has accelerated its power and is close to the US. However, the US has the highest GDP than any other country in the world, but with China a close second. At the same time, we need to know that the US military strength is such that no country can match it. For many years, the US has remained on the top for military expenditure. For the last year, it spent $866 billion US dollars, while China only spent 293 billion and Russia even less with 109 billion. However, the US also has a staggering debt of $38.5 trillion, and the interest payments on this debt are higher than what it spends on its military. There is no doubt that the US, with its multiple wars of aggression, its continuous trade and tariff wars, has still not been able to outdo Chinese economic power. And to the US, China stands as its most dangerous adversary. It can be said that at this point in history, the most critical major contradiction in the global arena is between imperialist powers. As US sees itself slipping off the top ladder, it's now clearly moving aggressively to maintain its hegemonic control globally. And this is what the NSS paper spells out clearly. The NSS paper can be categorized into 3 parts, which are economic focus of the US, its military focus, and lastly, its shift in ideology from liberalism to fascism. For maintaining its supremacy, the US is employing a 2-pronged approach. One set of strategies are aimed externally at the world, and the other internally for its homeland, as it loves to call itself. For the US, key economic targets are trade routes, critical minerals, including fossil fuels, of course, and then another key area is export of weapons through the military-industrial complex, which has now been renamed the Defense Industrial Base. The US, for its plunder, has marked different regions globally. The most prominent enunciation has been its claim on Latin America and the Caribbean region. Reiteration of the Monroe Document and the addendum, the Trump corollary, are indeed a shocking reminder of the colonial past. The kidnapping of President Maduro and the first combatant, Celia Flores, is a direct implementation of US's aim of maintaining the Latin American and Caribbean region as its colony. The US is bent on maintaining total control over key strategic locations. It has openly threatened China in the LAC region by stating that the region has to be free of hostile foreign incursions or ownership of key assets and those that support critical supply chains. End of quotation. The NSS also has directed challenges to China directly. It has stated that halting and reversing the ongoing damage that foreign actors have inflicted on the American economy which include state subsidies and industrial strategies, unfair trading practices, intellectual property theft, and industrial espionage. All of this is directly directed at China. Other points that the NSS has included are maintaining secure and reliable supply chains. We see that today in how they are trying to maintain their siege of the Strait of Hormuz, access to critical minerals and rare earth elements. Then lastly, keeping the Indo-Pacific free and open, preserving freedom of navigation in all crucial sea lanes. Of course, we see that through the siege of the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf. I believe today only an Iranian flagged cargo ship was pirated by the US Navy. In terms of economic policy of the US under the NSS, a key area is also reindustrialization, that is reshoring. The US is now doing all it can to bring back all its corporations that are functioning outside the geographical area of the United States. And of course, one of the key targets is again China, because many of the mega corporations operate in China. And of course, monopoly capital is being provided a free hand. Very clearly, the NSS states that private sector will be the one to reindustrialize the nation. There is emphasis on not only production for consumption at home, but also for exports. A key arena for exports through its mega weapons corporations. The Make America Great Again approach has been to bully its allies and partners to increase military spending. And of course, that spending has to be based on purchasing weapons from the US and weapon industry. But some carrots have also been offered by the US in return, which include favorable treatment on commercial matters, technology sharing, and defense procurement. In addition, the faltering US state has made numerous demands. One can also consider them as threats on countries and regions globally. These demands include that countries must decrease their trade with China. The dictate is that the dictate to China is that it must absorb its surplus production in its own domestic markets, meaning that China should not be exporting, but try and just limit itself to its own boundaries. At the same time, the US has advised Europe and Asia to send their exports to other countries and step away from China. It should be pointed out that while the US is targeting the state-owned Chinese corporations, it is providing aggressive economic and military support to its corporations. The security agreements that have been accompanied, that have included bilateral and multilateral trade agreements in the past decades, are testimony to this fact. I would also like to remind us of the investor-state dispute settlement mechanism, which is utilized for guarding monopoly capital in our countries, and Pakistan is a case in point. While threatening other countries to step away from China, the US still seeks some form of trade partnership with China. It is believed that it wants to engage with it, but only on non-sensitive factors, which means it will not trade on minerals and critical or through critical supply chains. The US is keen to put a stop to Chinese advances in artificial intelligence, and that is one of the major focuses of the United States. Quantum mechanics, I think, is one key area which the US is very, very paranoid about, because AI technology is the one which is now being used across all sectors, whether it is military or it is economics, it is service, we know that. And the Chinese have used different methods and means of staying ahead. I believe a major shift of scientists in these technologies have now moved away from the US to China, and it remains a highly contested area between the Chinese and the United States. Lastly, financial monopoly is the highest form of imperialism, and the hegemony of the US dollar over financial and capital markets allows it to wield power globally. The NSS has not failed to emphasize the US superiority in financial and capital markets, and the directives are to maintain US leadership in digital finance and innovation. Artificial intelligence and advanced technologies are being emphasized to maintain and deepen US hegemony globally. However, China has also shown its hand clearly on this point. During the Ramadan war, trading of oil through the Strait of Hormuz has been based on yuan, and it is one of the clearest examples that China is actively trying to break the financial control of the US petrodollar. Just today, I read that United Arab Emirates, one of the biggest puppets of the US, has also warned the US that it may be forced to use yuan as a currency for its oil trade. So I think the biggest battle is not only for territory, but also to maintain financial uh, uh, financial control, deepen um, its hold on the petrodollar, which the Americans are actually now losing ground on through the clever strategies that China and Russia have been using, especially in the Asia Pacific region. And they were also using it in Latin America, but the US has very successfully put a stop in that region. Now I will come to the second strategy, which is military might. In its external strategy, the second strategy is flexing uh, its military might. Ostensibly, military aggression is based on sound reasoning. It is getting rid of social evils such as drug cartels and narco-terrorism. While the truth is, of course, to curtail Chinese investment, trade, and political influence by the use of such terms. One way to curtail Chinese investment, trade, and political influence in the region is through creation of an enemy such as drug cartels and narco-terrorists. And for China, the threat being used is the export of fentanyl precursors that fuel America's opioid endemic. That has not been used fully as yet, but it's kind of a stick that they're holding. The nations and people who have lived under colonialism are used to such derogatory terms that define our territories and populations in order to be conquered and controlled. It is an old time-tested strategy of not only the US, but of colonial powers, where labeling of countries and communities by particularly derogatory terms to create devils that have to be obliterated or heathens to be brought into the fold of Western context of so-called civilization. We know that, especially we who live in the Asia and Pacific, in Latin America and Africa, know these terms very well. And the best thing about all of this is that people now understand and fight back and are no more subjugated by such absolute forms of terrorism that the US and the Europeans employ. Use of military might against China is also to curtail export of Chinese products to the US. Up till now, these issues have been fought through use of trade wars and even diplomacy. However, as we all know, matters are fast deteriorating. A key military policy, which is also an economic policy, is the strengthening of the US military industrial base. The manufacturing of arms and ammunition must meet the needs of defeating big and small, all forms of US adversaries. Building an enviable defense industry is, of course, in line with the call peace through strength. That is one of the key calls that the NSS and the defense strategy of the United States is using, a slogan which is just based on lies. Secondly, the US is consolidating its satellite of countries and political blocs and ensuring they also have needed defense capabilities when it finally comes to a global war. Lastly, the US aim is to maintain a military which remains the most powerful globally. We see some crystallization of contesting blocs, but also a continuation of tug of war that is happening, trying to pull countries in one or the other camp, whether it is the Chinese camp or the United States. The US has specifically pointed out Iran and its proxies as clear enemies, not only for the US, but of course Israel. Also, that it is an incubator or exporter of terror. The Strait of Hormuz, including South Asia and West Asia, have already been pulled into a terrible war being carried out by the US. All its demands are basically nonsense and defy national sovereignty. However, as been stated before, the US will fabricate any amount of lies to ensure its control over various regions. The challenge ultimately is not Iran, but cutting off oil from Iran to China, which is a lifeline for China. That is the main ploy. We should also note that recently the US and Indonesia have signed a deal called Major Defense Cooperation Partnership, a pact that will be a threat to Chinese energy and trade routes. According to the US Department of War, we will build, posture, and sustain a strong denial along the first island chain. The Indonesian Pact is one of the first steps in US imperialism plan to provide the US military greater access to ports and other facilities in Southeast Asia. The aim is to build such a strong military presence that it serves as a deterrent for any hostile activity against US interest from its currently most hated enemy, China. The last point that I will now make is the fascist tendencies that are now very clearly seen in the US. It is basically at the moment an inward and outward policy. And the US has shifted away from its call for human rights, liberal democracy, rights of women, rights of LGBTQI community, and so on. An inhumane target are migrant workers in the US. In the post-World War II period, US imperialism at least paid lip service to international rule-based order, while, of course, doubting liberalism. That is now only history. The fascist nature of the US with its America First and MAGA enunciation is clear, with racism being more and more apparent, a phenomenon that has been building up since 9/11, and from where most concretely Islamophobia sprang up. The US is facing a severe crisis in its home front where progressive forces have fought for many rights. These have included the diversity, equity, and inclusion-based policies. The NSS points out how the radical gender ideologies and woke lunacy has been taken out of the US armed forces. It has been made clear that cultural subversion or any other threat to the nation will not be tolerated. These are clear threats against democratic progressive positions, which provide space and attention to cultural diversity. In short, white supremacy is the order of the day. In the past decades, there have been strong environmental friendly laws in the US, but the government is now taking these progressive frameworks head on with the fascist call for MAGA and America First. Reindustrialization and developing the energy sector is based on rejecting any credibility to issues of climate change or net zero ideologies. We all know of ICE, which has been Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, which has now been going around the country picking people of color randomly and subjecting them to detention, imprisonment, and deporting them. All these different levels of violence carried out under humiliating circumstances. The term mass migration is used as a threat and is being used to ensure white supremacy in the United States. While the US has been sending the same message to Europe, the Secretary of State Marco Rubio's speech at the Munich Security Conference earlier this year, and to point out that he's son of a Cuban migrant, was heavily laced with reincarnation of colonialism. I quote, "In a pursuit of a world without borders, we opened our doors to an unprecedented wave of mass migration that threatens the cohesion of our societies, the continuity of our culture, and the future of our people. We made these mistakes together, and now together we owe it to our people to face those facts and to move forward, to rebuild. For the US and Europe, we belong together. We are part of one civilization, the Western civilization. We are bound to one another by the deepest bond that nations could share, forged by centuries of shared history. Christian faith, culture, heritage, language, ancestry, and the sacrifice of our forefathers made together for the common civilization to which we have fallen heir." And I would just like to remind all of us, what do we know of European colonization, of the US colonization of our nations, whether we are from an African nation or from South Asia, Southeast Asia, Latin America. And these are the sacrifices they are talking about and the cultural heritage. So apart from at one point calling for Europe to unite, we also see that for them, for the United States, diplomacy is a sham. And the NSS has openly mocked it, describing it as a cloud castle-based abstraction, like the rules-based international order. International organizations are being challenged, including NATO, the European Union, and the United Nations. It has also been made clear that cultural subversion or any threat to the nation will not be tolerated. These are clear threats against democratic progressive positions, which provide space and attention to cultural diversity. In short, white supremacy is the order of the day. So I will end there just to finish with that in these times for organizations, people's organizations, mass organizations, anti-imperialist organizations, there is nothing else for us but to hasten our work, organizing and mobilizing the masses. The resistance by Palestine, the resistance by the Philippines are all liberation struggles that are there for us to follow and be a beacon to our own liberation struggles in our nations, in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Astra, for giving us a very detailed description and criticism of the U.S. national security strategy, the U.S. geopolitical and economic agenda in this war. It's continuing war production under the new name, no, Defense Industrial Base, the war for resources, which will heavily affect our communities and territories. You also gave us a view on how the U.S. is the primary driver of the imperialist contradiction in the world today. The US is dragging people around the world into war, threatening our lives, resources, and sovereignty, and of course, the unity of the people. And of course, you gave us hope, no, a call that there is a need to intensify our resistance, no, the people's liberation. Thank you very much. If you have questions for Azra, you can write them in the chat box, and we will call on you later to read them during the open forum. Okay. So allow me to introduce our next two speakers. No, both have been active not only in the interfaith and ecumenical community, but in the advocacy against empire and for peace. So our second speaker is Mr. Reverend Chris Ferguson. Chris, as many of you know, is a social justice advocate from the United Church of Canada. He served as General Secretary of the World Communion of Reformed Churches, and he is now an international visiting professor in Colombia. So, Chris, are you there?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, very much. Hello, Chris. Salam. So
Good to
we
see
can
you.
start now.
Thank you. I'm speaking from an airport lounge in Taiwan, and it's possible someone will come and tell me to shut up. But let's see how we go. Thank you very much, and it's important at a profound moment. I understood that one of the very specific focus issues of this webinar was particularly the relationship between religion and empire. And I think to state extremely clearly that in the current situation, this is a very specific moment of the readjusting of power relationships between empires and unmasking the reality. But this is not a new reality, but the deeply rooted history of empire, imperialism, motored by capitalism, driven by ideologies, patriarchal ideologies of extremism fueled by concepts of state terror and fascism. And that in the face of this, not only, as the title says, has religion been weaponized, but what has been revealed is, in fact, religious justification and religious ideologies are revealed as being the beating heart of empire. It isn't that empire is one thing and religion is another thing, but that all empires in their scheme of domination, control, and imposition are motored by deeply seated and constructed theologies. It's not that there is an ideological use of theology, but that empires themselves, from the Roman Empire to the Greek Empire, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, all these empires, in fact, were highly religious, and that usually the supreme leaders and the focus people were always and clearly also high priests or religious spokespeople for the thing. Mitri Raheb, a Palestinian theologian, speaking specifically of the way this has been revealed in the situation in Palestine and through the genocide in Gaza, has talked in his book about decolonizing Palestine, uses the figure of theology as the software of empire and and oppression, and that as the mechanisms of terror, whether it's bombings, checkpoints, social control, um, all the hardware of military destruction, surveillance technology is made possible by deep-seated religious justifications, and the software is more and more being exposed as being explicitly theological. We know that one of the founding myths of America that permitted American expansionism in the US is the concept of manifest destiny, that the whole project of the United States needed to be conceived to justify its settler colonial project as a city set on the hill, as the light that would guide all the nations. The Monroe Doctrine itself, now the Donroe Doctrine, the Trump take on the religious justification for territorial expansion, extractivism, and domination, is explicitly linked to the constructed a warrior God that needs a warrior people to defend it, to extend the salvation of, in fact, on earth that can only be brought to fruition through the imposition of military might and power. That these are, as I say, not simply excuses or added on ideological justifications, but are in fact close to the beating heart of empire. And in the case of this is cynically expressed, yet irreversibly related to settler colonial and domination processes, whether in the Philippines or in Palestine, where you can see that Ben Gurion, one of the leading Zionist figures and first president famous of Israel, famously said that this land was given to us by the God we don't believe in, and that the deepest sense of resistance to empire has to do with decolonizing theological constructs of destruction. And for communities of faith that are in solidarity with the oppressed people, we find a growing unmasking of the way that our faith not only has been instrumentalized, but there is, in fact, a whole construction of a Christianity in service to empire that is probably, in a certain sense, unredeemable. That its own deep entanglement to the idolatry of the capitalist market as the hand and engine of human well-being, faults and evil in that construction is and so that even to take figures like Jesus himself and other figures of anti-imperial resistance like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, these very figures have been taken and twisted. J.D. Vance uses Catholic teachings, as we see now in the confrontation with the Pope, takes the very teachings that say that war is only a last resort instrument of defending the defenseless and turns it into the Catholic justification falsely of war as a legitimate instrument of reordering global power to favor the powerful at the expense of the others. So that rather than just be kind of a additional ideological remnant or artifact of a superstructure, I think now that religious communities that are deeply committed to the practice of standing in resistance to empire as the center of their faith, now understand in relationship with political thought that we have a stronger contribution to make than we thought in the decolonizing of the very software, and that a religion can't be seen as simply, as they said, something that's brought in and instrumentalized, but that there is no system of oppression that can work without hierarchies of exclusion. Who are the good? Who are the bad? Who are the dangerous? And that's why all the politics around on the micro level is you must have these hierarchies of people that are, and projects, people's projects must be listed as dangerous and terrorists, that the whole entire construction of Islamophobia as the dangerous terrorists that are jeopardizing the world order. And then this is brought down, as the last speaker said, into homegrown fascism, where there needs to be embedded structures of obedience and authority. So in this case, trans people are the issue about the discrimination of trans people is to say that there are those who decide in terms of a hierarchy of necropolitics of who lives and who dies. And it could be trans people, it could be racist categories, gender categories. The important thing is that to indicate that there is always the group that can be identified as excluded. And if you don't go with the program of fascist control and domination, your group will simply be added to that group. So that Gaza teaches us several things in terms of the way in which religious ideology and theological selection was used to justify why Palestinians and Muslims were dangerous, and why it was totally justified for the world to be party to their extermination through a genocide, because it fits into the necropolitics of empire that always works in terms of supremacy and exclusion, but not only to the ends of raw power, but with the pledge that this exclusion and discrimination, elimination of the is always in service of a greater project of salvation with a higher purpose. The turning point, I think, for many religious communities in our times have been coming to grips with economic globalization after the fall of the Soviet Union, and having religious communities in the global South really speak of their own pain and be able to relate their suffering and exploitation and oppression at the hands of globalized savage market capitalism, and see that the issue wasn't only the economic oppression, but its justification, that the market was presented as unchangeable, that the market was presented as divine, the invisible hand, that human sacrifice was of the many was seen as a good to defend the interests of the poor, of the few. And in that sense, there were religious communities that rose up, like the World Community Alliance of Reformed Churches, that clearly named the idolatry of capitalism, not only the evil of its oppression, but also the falseness of its claims to be for the common good. And from that, understanding the relationship between empire and capitalism, patriarchy and capitalism, racism and capitalism, militarism and capitalism, and focusing, as we heard at the very end of the last speaker, that the focus of a community following Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus of Galilee, is to understand the dynamic in which Jesus's life, ministry, and crucifixion was in resistance to empire, and that the defining context of the religion is the solidarity with the victims of empire, the crucified peoples. Using crucifixion now not as alluding to the Christian's story, but to the story of crucifixion as the instrument that is iconic for how empires try to destroy all those that resist. The cross being the preeminent tool that was especially invented of all instruments of torture and elimination to exemplify what will happen to those that raise their heads against empire. And that the core of the religious solidarity that's required now is for religious communities in light of the picture that the previous speakers painted, and we see this in the figure of the Pope, is the direct taking on of empire, decolonizing images of God that are the warrior God that is over and against, that oppresses, that demands unquestioning obedience. In fact, what one theologian called Christo-fascism, the creation of religious images where religion itself is the handmaiden of fascist thinking, and calls for obedience and never for resistance. And so just to end for the few minutes I have is to say, I think there is a growing movement where there is the part of the religious community that is aiding and abetting through ideologies of Christian Zionism, ideologies of supremacy and racism, Christian nationalism, and there's at the same time a firmly committed and growing Christian community focusing on profound solidarity with the crucified peoples, the people that are in resistance to empire, and that see, as the last speaker said, that the call now is to, yes, take away the software of empire. Our job will not be to take on the empire militarily, but to drain it of its legitimacy and to stand firmly beside those who are among the crucified and oppressed and organize with them to transform the domination of empire into a community of life for people in the earth. So thank you for this opportunity for us to say that this is a unique moment, a special moment in a long history of oppression that calls for religious actors to directly address our role in refusing to allow religious justifications to be part of the beating heart of empire.
Thank you very much, Chris, for explaining to us how religion is being weaponized, no, as part of the cultural offensive of this war, no? The weaponization of Christian nationalism to justify wars of aggression. This is new to me, Chris, no, the Christo-fascism, no. It's like Trump portraying himself as Jesus clearly depicts that, no. So all of this,
And if we want to go further, this was just to one word to give everybody their due. This was a phrase coined by Dorothy Solle, Soelle, a German theologian, now passed, in her book Beyond Mere Obedience.
Yes, thank you very much. No, so all of these discussions, no, it brings us back to the clash of civilizations debate, which was widely invoked during the War on Terror. Another term widely used during the War on Terror is Islamophobia, which has often been invoked to justify imperialist wars. To tell us more about this, we have Professor Junaid S. Ahmad. Are you here, brother?
Just to say, excuse me if I'm still live. Greetings to my dear brother Junaid, and just to say that I'm afraid I will have to leave you now.
Okay,
Hi,
salam.
Chris. Good to hear
Hi,
you.
Junaid. Hi. Okay, I'm sorry I won't be here for your good talk. I hope I'll get it on the recording.
Sure, of course. Good to see you.
Peace to you. Yes.
Peace.
Junaid, could you help us see you more clearly? Because your camera is, I think you have to do something about your camera.
No,
You're
I have one
upside
second.
down. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Okay, there.
Is that
So,
better?
yes, that's better. Well, salam alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam. So good to
Yes.
be with all of you.
Yes, I'll introduce you first, okay? So, Professor Junaid Ahmad is the director of Center for Global Dialogue and professor of Middle Eastern Politics at the University of Lahore in Pakistan. He served as Secretary General of the International Movement for a Just World based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and is a visiting fellow at the Berkeley Center for Islamophobia and Ethnic Studies Graduate Center. So, Professor Junaid, the floor is yours, brother.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be with friends and comrades. And thank you to Peace for Life and old comrades, Alan and Amira and Azra. So wonderful to reconnect with you all after such a long time. But it shows that Peace for Life will never die. It will always be here, inshallah. So I've been asked to speak about a topic that I've spent the last perhaps 2 to 3 decades now studying and speaking about, and that is Islamophobia. And it seems like this subject, unfortunately, never goes away. So I will try to be as concise as possible, and especially with the knowledge that many of you have also been uh, in over particularly since the war on terror, being able to kind of critique and analyze the function of Islamophobia and empire and Zionism. So let me begin with the present moment. So we're currently witnessing an escalating US-Israeli war on Iran. And alongside this war, we're seeing something very familiar, the reactivation of Islamophobia as a tool of empire. The same narratives used to justify violence against Palestinians are now being deployed against Iranians. They're described as irrational, dangerous, as a civilizational threat. So what we are seeing is not new. It is a pattern. And this brings me to the central question I'll pose today. How does extreme violence become publicly understandable and even justified? My argument has always been Islamophobia is not just prejudice, it is an active instrument used by empire to justify war, intervention, and domination. And today it is operating simultaneously in Gaza and in Iran. Since October 2023, we have witnessed extraordinary violence in Gaza, a genocide. And now that violence is expanding regionally. But alongside the bombs, there's something else, a flood of narratives, speeches, media coverage, official statements. Because violence, as we know, is not only physical, it is also discursive. It depends on language. Who is seen as a victim? Who is seen as a threat? What actions are justified? So the real question is, what narratives make this violence acceptable? And to answer that, we need to rethink Islamophobia, not simply, as I said, as prejudice, but as infrastructure of war. We've seen this before in Iraq, in Afghanistan, throughout the war on terror. In each case, Muslims were portrayed as inherently violent, irrational, opposed to civilization. And that portrayal did crucial work. It made violence appear defensive, necessary, even moral. And we are seeing the same mechanism today in Gaza and now in Iran. Across both contexts, the same set of narratives is repeated. Muslims are portrayed as sexually deviant, barbaric, driven by irrational hatred. Let me take these briefly in turn. After October 7th, as many of us know, claims of systematic sexual violence circulated widely. And now sexual violence can occur in war. But here, these claims were used differently. They were presented as defining characteristics, often before verification. This draws on a long-standing trope: Muslim men as hypersexual and predatory. And we see the same logic elsewhere. In discourse about Iran, similar gendered narratives appear: backwardness, repression, moral deviance. Notice the asymmetry. Violence by Muslims becomes cultural. Violence against Muslims becomes incidental. This is how Islamophobia works. The second narrative is barbarity. Palestinians and now Iranians are framed as savage, irrational, dangerous. In Gaza, we saw graphic claims designed to shock. Whether verified or not, they shaped perception. In the Iran war, we hear similar language: menace, chaos, threats. This reflects a deeper binary: the West as civilized, Muslims as barbaric. And once that binary is activated, extreme violence becomes easier to justify, because if the enemy is inhuman, then anything becomes necessary. The third narrative is the most powerful: that Muslim actors are driven by irrational hatred. In Gaza, this is framed as inherent anti Semitism. In Iran, it appears as fanaticism, extremism, hostility to the West. But the function is the same: it removes context, it erases history, politics, material conditions, and replaces them with one idea: these are irrational enemies. Once that happens, war seems inevitable, diplomacy seems pointless, violence seems justified. So, what do these narratives do collectively? They depoliticize, they erase. They erase what? Colonization, occupation, intervention. And they replace them with fear, morality, spectacle. A political struggle becomes a moral drama. But something important is happening. These narratives are beginning to break down. The images from Gaza, destruction, displacement, mass death, have shifted global perception. And that shift extends to the war on Iran. There is growing skepticism, and we are seeing a reaction: censorship, repression, crackdown on protest. This tells us something crucial. When a narrative stops convincing, it must be enforced. And that suggests not strength, but panic. So, why does this matter? Because language shapes reality. If Muslims, Palestinians, or Iranians are seen as threats, their suffering disappears, their deaths become acceptable. But when that narrative cracks, new possibilities emerge, new solidarities form. Let me end with a broader reflection. Throughout history, extreme violence has been enabled by narratives that dehumanize, simplify, moralize. What we are witnessing today fits that pattern. But there's also something more. We may be living through the final and most dangerous phase of empire and Zionism, a phase where violence becomes more visible, more extreme, and more openly justified. And yet, this is not the whole story, because alongside this, there is resistance across the world and within the imperial core itself. So the narrative is not finished. that the same moment that produces violence also produces new awareness. So we return to our question: how does violence become understandable? But also, what new ways of understanding and resisting are emerging? As Arundhati Roy once wrote, another world is not only possible, she is on her way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, brother, as always. Very much detailed on our culture, no? Learning more and more about our culture and religion, no? So
Thank you.
again, we will uh, welcome, no, the questions later at the open forum. But before that, we will have a short um, break, no, a cultural break. It's a video recorded before the war on Iran. It's a song written, no, by one of the Filipino compositors, revolutionary compositors, no. He mentions Palestine and Venezuela in his video. He doesn't mention Iran because when it was recorded, it was before the this U.S. And Israel war on Iran. So here is Danny Favela with this song, The Peace That We Want.
Versions of peace in this world. The version of the imperialists and the aggressors, and the version of the people facing in displacement, violence, and injustices. And in solidarity with the oppressed people of the world, particularly the people of Palestine and Venezuela, I would like to offer this song entitled The Peace We Want. Without your warships, a land without your tanks, a sky without your warplanes, where doves are free to fly. This is the peace we want, the place we want to live. This is the life we long to see. A playground for our children, and not the battle zone. Clothing, food, and shelter, not your bullets and bombs. This is the peace we want, the place we want to live. This is the life we long to see. So go home now, go home now, you leave us alone. Go home now, go home now, bring your arms along. Women free from violence, no longer held in chains, as they sing of freedom, not wail in grief and pain. This is the peace we want, the place we want to live. This is the life we long to see. So go home now, go home now, you leave us alone. Go home now, place we want to live. This is the life we long to see.
Yes, no, this is the peace that we want to see. So we're now opening the floor, no, for your questions. But I want to read the message from the message in the chat box. No, it's from Mohidin Hedsik. Uh, I hope, brother, I have given justice to pronouncing your name, no? He asked about Pax Silica, which I think Professor Azra has already mentioned, no, some of the objectives of the U.S., no, uh, as a US-led, international strategic coalition, no, that would be used, no, as a supply chain to secure AI and semiconductor supply chain, no, for this war, no. I also would want to just made mention that Philippines is part of that Pax Silica. President Bongbong Marcos has recently joined, no, accepted the invitation, and we're the only ones, I think, in the countries that mentioned who joined the Pax Silica, who is not an industrialized country or has a manufacturing. So, what is our support for this Pax Silica? Uh, Again, as a supply for the raw materials, no, for the critical minerals that they would need for the weapons, no, to be used, for this war, or for the wars of aggression that the U.S. and Israel will commit to the world. So that's Pax Silica for the Filipino people. No, I think there's a question, direct message, no, for Azra. People are asking how should we, no, as people, as countries, no, how are we fighting back against imperialist drives of the U.S. national security strategy? You have made mention some of the grassroots activities, but there bigger global or nationwide courses of action?
Thank you, Amina, for putting that question. I think the biggest responsibility that we have as people of the world, as activists, is to organize our communities in which we live. The major blocks are, of course, the workers and the peasants. But we also have, for instance, South Asia has like 60% of youth as its population, and it is our responsibility to bring in these young people, these young men and women, into the realm of activism and to stand up against imperialism, specifically against US imperialism. There is no bigger enemy of the people at this point than the United States, which has shown its colors so clearly now, especially for the young generation. I think when I was a young woman, it was harder to see what US could do to the people. But now I think there's nothing left hidden. So number one, organize. Organize in your neighborhood, organize in universities, in schools, organize amongst peasants, amongst workers, amongst women. So that for me is number one. The second is to join organizations such as ILPS, have your mass-based organizations and join. There are many. We have the International Migrants Association, which really looks after migrants. And I keep thinking of the migrants in the Gulf region right now. There are so many millions of Pakistanis there, so many of our people there. The Filipinos are there. And there are now crew members on ships which are not being allowed to dock in the Gulf countries. So we have people everywhere in every walk of life it is our responsibility to reach out and organize against the United States, organize for Gaza, organize for the political prisoners of Palestine, whom they are going to hang 10,000 people, organize for the political prisoners across the world, organize to boycott. One of the easiest things to do, which I don't think people are doing, is to boycott. Why do we want to use their commodities, which we can actually have made at home? There are things which we have no other alternative, so we will use like computers or phones or other stuff, which our countries are not producing. But why use your money to strengthen the corporations? So I think that is another one. But at the highest point is also to prepare for armed struggle. We see what is happening in Iran. We have seen the massacres in Palestine and Lebanon now. It will come to our communities. For me in Pakistan, it's now a very real reality that this is going to come across our borders. And are we ready? The question is, are we ready to take up arms against these people who will come in for certain rape, the women, the children, hold them hostage, do whatever they can do to our people. So I think, the shades are off. Everything is now crystal clear. And it is time for us to stand up. And at least, if nothing else, we don't want to go to every level of resistance, which is the highest form, is the armed struggle. We can do so many other things that we can do. Go into communities and educate ourselves and the communities on what they are suffering because of neoliberalism. The policies of privatization and deregulation in the peasant communities in Pakistan, people are suffering so badly from hunger, from lack of work, from the high temperatures in our countries with no electricity. So there's no lack of what we cannot do. And I urge everybody to try and read as much as possible, carry out political education in every nook and corner of our country, of our region, of our global society. So thank you very much. I hope I was clear. Also, there is a need to organize politically and militarily. There are two different wings, and we need to start doing both very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Azra. No? Uh, we are joined this evening by our close friend, no, from the Embassy of Venezuela, the Chargé d'Affaires, Richard Lobo, and we call him Comrade Lobo, no? Because we have been with him for a very long time in this our fight, against imperialism. He has a message to us. If you want to read your message, can you open your camera and or I'll read the message.
Hello, good evening, comrades. I don't know if did I open my camera or
It's okay if you can open your camera.
is it opening? It's open. Well, I don't know how to do it, but
Okay.
anyway, yes, I would like to send this message from the Bolivarian Revolution of Venezuela. That despite all the setbacks that we have been suffering in the recent time due to our closeness, geographic closeness with the hegemon of the North, this United States, U.S. imperialist regime. There, even with that, we have the endurance, we have the resistance, we have the strength, not only us in Venezuela, but in Cuba and the Western Hemisphere as well, in order to stop this war of aggression. And of course, we keep supporting Iran in this war because we see it as a liberation, war of freedom, of including Palestine, including Syria, including all the countries in West Asia that have been submitted for such a long time with this two regimes, the U.S. imperialist regime and the Zionist entity. So this is my consideration, and to keep up the fighting, to keep up struggling. And we know this is a real war against evil, against dehumanization, against all what comes from the field of the society and the field of a capitalist. So we are against this, and we know that we will prevail. Thank you very much, Comrade Amir.
Thank you very much, Comrade Shard. um, you also have a question, no? I think this is Professor Junaid, brother. You can answer this. He has a question that has something to do with the Sunni and Shia debate, no? So another form of shaping the narrative on this war of aggression comes with stressing the differences more than complementarities between the Shia and Sunni faith. This is something that the people under resistance must be aware of. Maybe, brother, yes, brother Junaid, you can answer, or you can have a
Yes,
comment.
sure, sure. No. This, as we've seen, particularly in this war against Iran, once again, these sectarian divisions are invoked by both empire and Zionism as a means of course, dividing the West Asian region, the larger Muslim world. And this historically, particularly since the Iranian Revolution in 1979, has worked in one way or the other. Because we should remember that the Iranian Revolution in 1979 was not, as many of the conservative Sunni monarchies in the Gulf portrayed it, as this kind of Shia revolution and this attempt to impose Shia theology on the rest of the Muslim world. Not at all. What it was an anti-monarchical revolution. It was a republican or a democratic revolution against a monarchy. And that is what the conservative Gulf monarchies feared. Not the theology of Shiism, but the political aspect of the Iranian Revolution. And so the particularly the Gulf monarchies, particularly Saudi Arabia, have tried since that time to portray Iran as this deeply theological expansionist power, wanting to impose Shiism. This stuff has collapsed now. Even in countries where they have were successful. I mean, for example, Pakistan, my own country, in the 1990s, the worst forms of sectarian violence, Sunni Shia violence, took place in Pakistan. We all know after 2003, the invasion of Iraq. Again, the very open weaponization by the empire in Iraq. Well, the Shias are like this, the Sunnis are like this, and dividing them up and so on. So what has happened, particularly, well, I think first with Gaza as well, and seeing how in Gaza, largely Sunni Muslims, in Lebanon, Hezbollah, Shias, Iran. So all of those distinctions collapse. But right now, we see it's in its most visible form. There's not just global, but even within the Muslim world, such solidarity right now with Iran. And again, I think that this is such an important development because, again, these regimes have been somewhat successful in the past portraying Iran as this very deviant Muslim regime. Again, the Shia, and so with very different from us. That's failed. Right now, about 90% of Pakistanis, and majority of them are obviously Sunnis, are standing with Iran. Many of them want to go and fight with Iran. So the interesting point right now is that all of those attempts to weaponize historical religious differences between Shia and Sunni, to weaponize that in a political way to serve empire and Zionism, that project has now failed. It is completely gone. And the vast majority of the Muslim world, who we were taught the propaganda that, well, this is just Shia Iranian regime, it's against all of the rest of the Muslim world, it wants to impose itself, that narrative has collapsed. And this is why, as I was saying, empire and Zionism are in panic mode right now.
Thank you, brother. No, and which also leads us to another question. I hope that Professor Asra could also answer this. No, so what can our faith communities, no, us, no, do to fight back against the religious justification for imperialist war? Think Professor Azra more than organized, no? Maybe you could also answer that, and then Professor Junaid also can answer.
Yeah, thank you for honoring me with that term, Professor Amira. I don't think I am professor, but thank you so much. I think in terms of political education, it's especially in Muslim countries, it's a very critical point. And I agree with Professor Junaid that a lot of this has been now kind of shiveled off brick by brick. But just remember that in countries like ours, especially Pakistan, there's a vast network of madrasas, a huge network. In the neighborhood where I live, there are 3 madrasas in just 1 kilometer surrounding me. And I think the good news is that they were all financed by Saudi Arabia to create the kind of hate culture that was prevalent, especially after 9/11, also during the jihadi war in Pakistan, which the Americans fully funded in the 1980s under the very fascist dictator General Ziaul Haq. And that has done a huge damage to how communities are geared. I think that danger, even though 100% I agree with Junaid that there is a huge turnaround of standing with Iran. And I think what has really helped is that people in Palestine are generally Sunnis, where Iran is Shiite Muslims. And that contrast, nobody, not the Saudis, not the Qataris, not the Emirates, all of those Muslim Arab countries, monarchies, dictatorships, sham Muslim countries, did not stand up for Gaza, for the Palestinians, whereas the Saudis did, Iran did. And so that has really been the major push that has taken away that kind of narrative of Shia Sunni divide. One is called kafir, one is called something else. Just 3-4 months ago, there was a Pakhtun girl in our office, young girl, and just then the Iran war had started. And we were talking about it on at our lunch table. And she said, well, Iranis are kafirs. And I was just taken aback. I said, where did you hear that? And she said, that is what the Maulvis tell us. And so in the months that they have gone by since January, I can see the change in her understanding and recognition. So I think the Iran war has also really helped in breaking down those barriers. Still, there needs to be intense political education in our communities, especially where there are Muslim majorities, and discuss imperialism rather than to discuss religion. Religion, good or bad, is something which is part and parcel of our cultures, and people can be good or bad, irrespective of what religion they are from. It is really to highlight how do we talk about imperialism, how do we talk about fascism, explain the roots of economic erosion that imperialist countries have brought into our communities. That's why, to me, it is very critical to talk about neoliberalism, to discuss privatization with people, because the daily impact on their lives through deregulation, through privatization, through trade liberalization is immense. And the farmers, even the most people who cannot read or write even a single word, understand what privatization has done to them. And so we need to juxtapose economic policies with religious discussions, so that they understand that we are not going against Islam, we are not going against whatever religion that community has, but to put it into political economy of our societies. That has won wars, that has won communities for us. I work with peasant communities in my country, and there has been a sea change in how these communities perceive imperialism, US, like for ages, for decades, this country has been like a puppet, and our nation has been a puppet to US imperialism. But if you go into the communities and start talking about where their lives are, where is their livelihood, where are the children, where is their education system, it's really seeps through, and it is much clearer the communities. So it's very critical. I think the key is political education, and anti-imperialism has to be the backbone of our political education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor in my heart. So, may we hear your opinion also, Professor Janae?
Yeah, well, first of all, whether professor or not, Azra is our teacher. We all learned so much from her, so she's certainly the professor for all of us. But Amir, can you, sorry, once again state the specific question? What was it about?
Yeah, sorry. They're asking, what can communities of faith do to fight back against the religious justification for imperialist war?
Right. Well, I mean, this is so. My presentation was obviously about how um, uh, so-called Western Judeo-Christian civilization, which is a complete absurdity, invented in the post-war period to justify empire and Zionism. It has no historical value to it whatsoever. So, I mean, obviously, I spoke about how the uncivilized other, which happens to be Muslims and Islam, is used for that project. But let me come to, because I think Azra raised some very important questions, particularly in the context of Pakistan, but I suspect much beyond Pakistan as well. I think what you had there, as Azra was correctly pointing out, you had a project in the 1980s. In some ways, again, in politically in responding to what happened in Iran, but using religious language to advance that project, and that was the project very much supported and funded by the Saudis, and of course by the United States, and that entailed rewriting the curricula of all of these madrasas, religious seminaries, to make them, for example, a concept like jihad, right? Like, I mean, it's armed violence against, as I was saying, against the kafir. Then the even the Muslim who claims to be Muslim but isn't really Muslim. And so you had that project, and that of course has polluted the that type of environment in terms of religious discourse, but the material weaponization of that's really harmed the country. But I think we have to be equally suspicious post 9/11 in a Pakistani context, and even today, actually, very much today, in which another tool is used, and that's not kind of, even though I don't use these terms, fundamentalist Islam or whatever extreme, and that is liberal Islam, actually. The liberal imperialist project after 9/11, of course, it's no longer liberal anymore, but the way that was promoted within the Muslim world by Muslim rulers themselves is that now we're moving away from that kind of jihadi Islam, and now we're having a more peaceful liberal Islam. It's not more peaceful. The point is that it's what it does, and this is what I say, is that constantly the powerful rewrite their script of what Islam should be to serve their interests, to serve local regimes, and to serve empire and Zionism. So if empire wants in the 1980s jihadi Islam, we will deliver them jihadi Islam. If after 9/11 it wants enlightened liberal Islam, we'll deliver it to them. We have no authenticity ourselves. Like, for example, the Iranians do. I think they do. I think the rest of the Muslim world needs to learn from that in terms of what, and I do. I mean, I don't think that you know me, I'm not one of those liberals that say, well, religion is this kind of private affair, etc. No, I very much believe in faith and religion being very much about your politics, that these things cannot be compartmentalized. But of course, as Amir and all our comrades know, we are talking about prophetic religion. We are talking about liberation theology, right? And which disturbs the old kind of what existed there in the 1980s and what continue, as I was saying, in these madrasas. But again, for me, the bigger problem today is not so much the kind of the hard right wing theology that was promulgated in the 1980s, but it is also the attempt, and we've spoken about this many times, to co-opt a genuine interfaith movement, interfaith solidarity, etc., into this liberal project that then serves empire and Zionism, rather than a grassroots project, which is very militant and should be militant in opposing local regimes and empire that again will always mobilize their newest form of whatever discourse on religion. Again, it could be like extremist, right wing, liberal, blah blah blah. They will co-opt all of these things for their interests. So that it's so important for us to maintain the type of authentic. And when I say like authentic Islam, doesn't mean like a pure like okay this is what it says, but it means that coming from our struggles, our politics, and I think the Iranians really show us how that's done today. I think that the rest of the Muslim world are inspired by it. Again, there's a difference between the regimes. Again, I've written about this so much during the genocide in Gaza. You just saw the utter moral bankruptcy of every single Muslim regime, except for Iran, on Gaza. And what has happened now is that the Muslim masses, they just cannot be controlled. So the regimes also have to respond a little bit. They also have to now be critical of Israel. They have to do these things because the Muslim masses are enraged. They are on fire, and all of the attempts to create these divisions, and especially the Shia Sunni, it is not working. And so that solidarity is there, and Azra is so right. This is the moment for hard political education because people are hungry for it.
So grand, brother. No, I remember during the war on terror debates, no, the U.S. has made famous the concept of Islam and democracy, and then also they wanted Sufism, no, to be
Yeah.
the kind of Islam that they want because they said that they wanted to popularize Jalaluddin Rumi, no, because he is peaceful. But I once had a conversation with an Afghan refugee, no, and I told him this, no, why is the U.S. promoting Jalaluddin Rumi and the swirling dervishes, no, and Sufism? And then he told me, don't worry about it, sister. If Jalaluddin Rumi is alive today, as a Muslim, if faced with oppression, he will also join the fight. He will also join the struggle. So I was, it's like everyone, no, it's a character of the people to fight, no, to struggle. So maybe Pastor Alan could also answer that question. So what can we do? No, that's just aside from the webinar like this for political education, but what can we also do to fight back, no, against religious justification for the imperialist war? Pastor Alan? Pastor Alan is still here. Okay, so maybe he's having a problem, no? Wait, oh, there. Hi.
Uh, I think this has been a very uh, productive webinar tonight. And we would like to thank our panelists, especially Asra, Chris, who has to leave, and of course, Junaid. Thank you for that very incisive, penetrating analysis on how empire is really doing everything using religion and faith to justify its plunderous wars. But the important thing is people are fighting. People are fighting back. There's resistance. It's happened in Gaza. It's happened in Iran, and it's happening in many parts of the world. So I think that is the challenge for all of us tonight. Let us continue the struggle, the fight. Let us expose how empire is using religion and faith to justify its wars of aggression using violence. So let us continue to unite. We need to really organize ourselves in our local communities and globally as peoples of faith, peoples of conscience. Let's continue this struggle and this fight against empire because, as we have already said, uh, uh, this kind of religious views is very much sin against God. So, thank you very much for participation of everyone, and let's continue to arouse, organize, mobilize our people against the weaponization of religion and faith in pursuit of an agenda of war and peace, which is really not the peace that we want. Because the peace that we want is a kind of peace in which people will live without empire. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pastor Alan. So thank you very much also for all the speakers, no? We have learned a lot, no? So as we close this webinar, no, the message calls us beyond reflection and into action, urging our communities of faith and conscience, to stand together against war, resist the misuse of religion to justify violence, and actively work for a just and lasting peace. May this not be the end of our gathering, no, but a beginning of our deeper commitment and collective action. We also encourage everyone to also join another ILPS webinar. May we uh, ask the ILPS to show the invitation. This is on April, yes, 27, to give us more about the situation in the world and given to us this interpretation of the writings of reflections on the writings of Professor Jose Maria Sison, the Chair Emeritus of the International League of People's Struggles. So, friends, comrades, no, and people of faith, thank you very much for this evening. Thank you very much for your sharings and participation also. So, may we have the last goodbyes from our speakers before we end our ano. Goodbye, sukran to all of you, and wassalamualaikum.
Goodbye. Thanks. So wonderful to be with all of you, Alan, Azra, Amira. Inshallah, many more.
Inshallah.
Take care. Take care. Bye bye.
Okay,
Bye
take
bye.
care. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.